from this day to that, for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Sorry for the technical difficulties. One of those software updates that likes to put a bug in the system. One thing I want to get into here later, I kind of want to cover this whole, Trump and his taxes and this whole deal. We'll get into that. We'll probably get into that in the second hour. But one thing I tend to like to cover is foreign affairs because, it's almost like clockwork that we have wars under these presidents, and where is the next one going to end up? Where can it escalate? Where is it going to go from there? And also looking at what other countries are doing, because I do believe that we are getting to the point of a world war. A lot of us have talked about we already are in a world war. We don't realize it. And when you look at the history of World War One and World War Two, you start not from when all the actual war breaks out, but the history of World War One starts before. Same with World War Two, and there's a lot of researchers that have talked about we're in World War Three. We just don't know it because the conflict hasn't completely broke out into that type of escalation yet. Could it happen? It's hard to tell. I get conflicting vibes from Trump, which again is why I don't trust him. In ways, I think he's genuine. In other ways, I think he is being used on certain agendas. But he could understand what is going on. He could be a willing puppet. I don't know. I don't know the guy. But there's some issues that are definitely worrying to me. And we have the conflict in the Middle East. But what's more worrying to me is the Asian conflict. And what brings me that is the whole, South China Sea. Japan's now, moving their biggest, it's actually a helo carrier, not a, so-called aircraft carrier. It's a helo or helicopter carrier. And with what the U.S. is basically doing in South Korea, and there's a lot of moving parts to this. Ron Paul covers a little bit in yesterday's Ron Paul Liberty Report, which we'll go ahead and cover that. And then I have some other articles and stuff that I read over, and we'll get into some of that. But we'll go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. And Daniel, it's good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. It looks like our administration and our government for years have never had enough activity overseas. It looks like they need to keep looking. You know, there's a lot going on in the Middle East and a lot of problems, and that hasn't been settled. But looks like there's more antagonism around China and Korea right now. You know, news just yesterday was that the Delta Force and the SEAL Team 6 are moving in with plans, and they're not secret plans, they're announced plan that they got to wipe out and take Kim Jong-un. And it doesn't seem like that's following the pattern of never tell your enemy what you're going to do. So the question is, why are they doing this? But there is a buildup. There's some military operations going on, joint military operations in South Korea. 290,000 South Korean troops that we finance, as well as over 10,000 American troops that are involved, along with these plans, or at least the announced threat that we're going to take out Kim Jong-un. And of course, the questions raised is, I wonder if China cares. You know, China might care about this. And we need to find out whether North Korea won't like it, but are they capable of doing anything about it? And it could be an accident. So it just seems like escalation is so unnecessary under today's conditions.
Yeah, no, there is the element, like with NATO exercises on the Russian border, there's the element of a provocation in these new exercises that the U.S., Japan, and South Korea are conducting. You know, as you pointed out, SEAL Team 6 and the Delta forces are there. The U.S. is also permanently stationing a drone division there that is capable of going into North Korea and striking the command and control systems. F-35s are going to be taking part, as well as B-52s and B-1 bombers capable of dropping nuclear missiles. So that's really a full dose, a full panoply of U.S. military might being brought to the forefront on North Korea's borders.
You know, with activity like this, you can understand why we have to tax the people more to build up our military. You know, this is all in defense. Of course, our government announced that this is all defense, you know, like somebody's going to invade us, but that's always the excuse. But to me, it seems like it's a lot of provocation. You know, why are we doing this? Is it unnecessary? And, you know, I've talked about Korea many times over the years and talking about the foolish policy that we have there, because I remember it so clearly. You know, 1950, not even really 5 years after World War II had ended, all of a sudden we're in a major fight again. But at that time, it wasn't the Congress had anything to do with it. It was Truman following the laws or the resolutions of the United Nations. One of the earliest things this peace organization did was really precipitate the Korean War, and then we went along with it. That was in June of 1950, 67 years ago. We've never had a peace treaty, and my complaint always is, why are we there? You know, we lost in Vietnam. We marched out, and Vietnam does pretty good, and we do pretty well with them, and we deal with them, and they became westernized. But not Korea. We were there to keep the peace, and look at it. It looks like somebody wants to have another Korean War or restore it, since there's never been a peace treaty.
Yeah. And it's, you know, there's an article just the other day, White House is considering the use of military force or regime change for North Korea. So all of these things send a signal, and you know, we're not here arguing that North Korea is a bunch of angels, you know, not at all. And they have been firing missiles. They have been testing missiles. They're looking for an intercontinental range ballistic missile that could hit the U.S. They're looking for all these things. The question is, why are we going over there to provoke this and to push this and to push them? First of all, we announced we're going to take him out, and then we complain that he's paranoid.
You know, yesterday we talked about, you know, giving more authority to our generals in the field, making major decisions. But there was also an announcement, you know, in the last day or two where Trump is giving more authority to the CIA to do things that actually Obama tried to not get them to do it, but they're getting more authority. So we're talking about the Delta Force and the SEAL team. But also, we hardly ever do anything when we have an overthrow of government. Sometimes we just get involved in their elections, believe it or not. We have the CIA involved, but now we have the Pentagon generals out there doing things. We have these kind of military operations. We have the CIA involved with less communications. Before it was emphatic that, yes, the CIA does launch a lot of drone missiles, and they're sending more drones over there. But there was this pretense that, well, we're going to assess the military necessity by at least the Pentagon reviewing it. But there'll be less of this. It just seems to me like it's opening up the door for something terrible to happen. You know, some accident. You have that danger, but you also have the danger of people lying us into battles. You know, if they really want to take this guy out, with all our ships being put over there, we've even talked to the Japanese to become more militarized than ever. They're sending, I think, a carrier into the South China Sea. The Chinese don't like this. The North Koreans didn't react as a bunch of pussycats about this. I mean, they talk this way all the time. I really think they're paper tigers, and that it gets overblown, just like the danger of Saddam Hussein was way overblown. And yet he's capable, you know, with all those ships around there. And if he has to prove himself as the tough guy defending the sovereignty of North Korea, you know, a little accident now and then, a ship may go down. But just look at the Gulf of Tonkin. I mean, we staged all that. It just 68,000 people died over this. Americans died because we got into that war based on a lie.
Yeah, and you're right. You wonder if these are provocations that are designed to get a reaction from Kim Jong-un to let him do something stupid and then allow something to, you know, to continue. You know, the Chinese, you asked earlier what the Chinese reaction has been, and they've actually been pretty calm. They tried to broker a deal last week between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan and North Korea. They called it freeze for freeze. If the U.S. would cancel these big military operations, I believe are going to go through the month of April. If you cancel these, then North Korea will cancel its ballistic missile tests and its nuclear tests. Well, the U.S. rejected that right away. They didn't want this. They had these things already planned. And so did the South Koreans and the Japanese, you know. And I think this is another example of what really is a moral hazard of them knowing that we will protect them no matter what they do. It gives them license to be more provocative in their own neighborhoods.
You know, I think the biggest joke is that the argument that this is all defensive, and the American people buy into this. They get convinced. They show what a monster the guy is, and that there's a great danger. And actually, when you add up all those troops, there's 300,000 troops. Do you need 300,000 troops to take care of North Korea if they attack somebody? What if they did send a missile to Japan and there was a need to do something? Well, I'd like Japan to take care of it. Yeah. But 300,000 troops there, and we're over there. I just think it's more offensive in many ways. It's not defensive. It has nothing to do with defending American interests. Could be if you have a broad definition of American interests. You know, we want to run the world. It's the interest of the empire, and it's our interest, if you believe in imperialism, in that we are especially as pointed as the peacekeeper. That it is only America's power that keeps the peace, and yet there's some that could make a pretty good argument the way that we throw around our power. It is the enemy of peace. It is the instigator. It's the precipitator of instability. And instability exists. It's in the Middle East like it's never been in many years. And now this does not create stability. And your mention about China, you know, maybe an opportunity that maybe there would have been maybe more stability if you'd say, okay, maybe we should do that. But no, I think what we're seeing here, and with the changes in rules for the CIA and the Pentagon generals and these military buildups, I would say the best word to describe this is significant increase in instability in the region, and it's very dangerous.
And this is the thing that I don't get. You know, Trump talks about other nations having to bear more of the burden of their own defense. this is a perfect case in point. Just as you pointed out a couple of minutes ago, if Japan and South Korea were forced to bear the entire burden of their foreign policy and the military implications of their provocations, I think they would back down. I think they would find a solution. They'd probably work with China to find a way to diffuse the problems in North Korea, maybe even turn it into a market for Japanese goods.
I think the more interesting speculation is, where's the deep state in all this? Because, you know, there's evidence that the deep state is not monolithic, and Trump has challenged it a bit. And yet some of the things that go on looks like the deep state is alive and well, you know, and that they win some of these battles. And they're the ones who, you know, really wanted to increase the fighting with Vietnam. And the deep state and those who had their special reasons got us involved in the Middle East, in the constant wars, and all in Syria and Ukraine and all these places. But right now there's a little bit of confusion, but it seems to me like the deep state is very much involved. I think the neoconservatives aren't exactly extinct yet. I think they're still very influential, and I think they're influential in this administration. And just why, you don't know, whether it's a philosophic decision or whether there's some pressure put on the administration to go along with the pressure that the neoconservatives wield.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Kim Jong-un may be an irrational person. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person I'd want as a neighbor. However, you can't argue that he's not behaving relatively rationally given the situation. You know, he has a hostile neighbor underneath him, or, you know, south of him. They're putting tons of weapons everywhere, and he's reacting by showing off his military forces too. It seems like a fairly rational response.
Now, one thing that the administration may be reasoning, and might not be too rational, is that it's not a big problem because, you know, Kim Jong-un is not exactly the best ally for China, and therefore China is not going to react. And I recall very clearly, though in high school, I can remember you know, the invasion by the UN forces to go in, and they were very, very successful. And each day in the newspapers that have a map of where our troops were, and they essentially conquered the whole peninsula in no time at all. But they didn't know what would happen, probably didn't anticipate, and they were caught off guard, and the Chinese moved in. And it was a big surprise, and boy, the South Koreans were, then the map reversed itself down to just a very, very small tip of South Korea, where the government existed. And of course, the war continued and continued. But I think the underestimation back then could occur once again, because do we know? Absolutely. I keep arguing that it's going to be tougher for us to get into a hot war with China, because we're so much better off. We're trading with China and all. But how much will they tolerate? Countries don't like their sovereignty a threat, and when they talk about that, they're serious. They mean this. That's the way the talk of our country is right now. So they're talking about North Korea. They'll go to the mat in fighting if their sovereignty is seen and loses credibility. Same way with China. If they interpret this of moving these very, very powerful missile radar systems into Korea, they're going to feel threatened too. So predictions are not all that reliable right now on what would happen. And it may be, and this is what I think is going on, is that the administration doesn't have a plan, you know, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you know, to carry this out. I sort of hope I'm right on that, that it's not that close. But I think it's just sort of ratcheting up things, you know, and sometimes they think, well, maybe the people themselves will rebel and get a better government. But they tried that in the Middle East, in Iraq and other places. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the key word, miscalculation. You know, all of the experts can miscalculate very easily.
So what do you think is going to happen? What is your opinion about the situation there?
Well, I saw a recent study that they look at the odds of something major breaking out, and I think they went up to like 40-some% in the next couple of weeks. For what it's worth, I hope they're wrong, and I hope you're right.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and I want to thank our audience for being with us today. I know this is not top of the news today. The snow is a big issue today, and also medical care is a big issue, and they have to be dealt with. But we did want to bring this program to you because we think it's significant, and hopefully it doesn't get out of hand. I hope there is no real serious plan to, really escalate the conflict between North and South America. But as I pointed out before, I think the conflict exists there. It's been there for 67 years, and I think it has persisted in the amount of dollars we have spent, hundreds of billions of dollars, financing this conflict between North and South, that one of these days we're going to wake up and say, maybe we ought to just mind our own business, and maybe we ought to just leave like we did in Vietnam. And we won so much more in a period of peace when we left and quit the war than we ever gained in war. And I would say that's what we need in Korea. We need to get out of there. The neighbors can take care of things. The South Koreans are more powerful, and the moral responsibility and political responsibility of the people over there in that region. So we still argue the case that for the Americans, for the American system and for our national security and for our financial reasons, it is in our best interest to mind our own business, and I'd stick to my argument, it's time to bring our troops home. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe on YouTube. Now, give me a second. Close this ad that just decided to pop up. When we look at the foreignpolicy.com website here, Japan, South Korea, and U.S. begin drills off North Korea. And this was actually published yesterday. On Tuesday, one day before, and again, it wants to freeze up. Okay. One day before U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson begins his first visit to Asia, warships from the United States, Japan, and South Korea began 2 days of drills to better be able to respond to ballistic missiles. The drills among three Aegis-equipped ships that can intercept ballistic missiles in flight come hard on the heels of last week's North Korean missile launch into the Sea of Japan. They also followed the deployment last week of the first parts of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD missile defense system to South Korea. Together, the deployments and the drills have raised temperatures in the region, prompting harsh language from Beijing and Pyongyang, and promise to make Tillerson's Asian tour particularly interesting. He will visit Japan, South Korea, and China. China's foreign ministry took all sides to task on Tuesday. On the one hand, the DPRK insists on advancing its nuclear and missile programs in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. On the other hand, the U.S., the ROK, and Japan are conducting large-scale military exercises, a spokesman said. This is a vicious circle and an upward spiral of tensions. It will do no good to any country, he said. North Korea, for its part, also lashed out at the exercises, threatening merciless ultra-precision strikes if its sovereignty is impinged. The missile defense exercise showcased not just tactical cooperation among Aegis-equipped ships. The more ships that work together, the better they should be able to track and shoot down incoming missiles. But also warmer ties between the U.S. allies, often at loggerheads with each other, Japan and South Korea. And it's part and parcel of Japan's naval forces playing a bigger part in the region. It was reported that Tokyo will send its biggest warship on a 3-month cruise through the disputed waters of the South China Sea before joining U.S. and Indian forces for maneuvers. Japan isn't contesting the South China Sea, but has said it wants to preserve freedom of navigation there, and perhaps wants to send a message to China regarding the East China Sea, where there are islands to which both countries lay claim. The Chinese foreign minister said a normal visit by Japanese ships is fine. But if going to the South China Sea has different intentions, then that's a different matter. Okay, what's going on here? Nothing's loading. It should just scroll. Okay. And that was out of foreignpolicy.com. I'll try and pull up this article. Everything wants to run slow today. Probably doesn't help that we have high winds again, but those should die off here in an hour or so. And that article just is not going to play with my browser today. But I did have, something that kind of got me was, one, the CIA has basically now been given the ability to conduct drone strikes, which previously it would have to, find a target and then send it to the military to conduct a drone strike, which now they have the ability to do it themselves. Now, if I can find it. We also know that it's reported that there are drones that have been sent to South Korea. Maybe part of the exercise, but I want to play this from AMTV. It's not a long clip, but he kind of covers both of those. Since I couldn't get the one article to pull up. Ads, if the website has a lot of ads on it, that's when my browser starts freaking out. Okay, here we go.
Trump authorizes CIA attack drones and sends more to South Korea. Of course, been talking about the intensification of rhetoric coming out of South Korea, the missiles launched into the Sea of Japan, the fact that SEAL Team 6, the same alleged operation that took out Osama bin Laden, is now about to take out Kim Jong-un and assassinate him, much like We've seen many other leaders assassinated in recent years, living leader Muammar Gaddafi, and of course Assad is also on the hit list of Western powers. Here's the report I'm referring to. This is from the Huffington Post. Like a dragon, report Trump gives CIA permission to perform drone strikes. The move would be a change from Obama's policy. No, it's not. It's the same policy. Limiting the CIA's paramilitary role. Of course, they've always been drone striking, bombing innocent men, women, and children. President Donald Trump has given the Central Intelligence Agency new authority to conduct drone attacks against suspected militants. The Wall Street Journal reported on Monday, citing U.S. officials. The move would be a change from the policy of former President Barack Obama's administration of limiting, I mean, that's BS. It's not a change of policy, the CIA's paramilitary role. The newspaper said, contributing article, Reuters, Trump gives CIA authority to conduct drone strikes, according to the Wall Street Journal. President Donald Trump has given the Central Intelligence Agency new authority, no, it's not new, to conduct drone attacks against suspected militants. The Wall Street Journal reported on Monday, citing U.S. officials. The move would be a change. No, it's not a move. So where are these drones headed to? That's the question. Where are the drone strikes? I mean, we know they're going on in Syria. 500,000 people dead, men, women, and children getting their faces blown off. This has been part of Barack Obama's program. It's now a part of Donald Trump's program, but who really cares? It's a humanitarian crisis, but the American people don't care. It's just hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered. Where are the drones going now? You guessed it. They are going to Seoul, South Korea. According to Liberty Riders News, attack of the drones. Trump just launched the drones, baby. Look where they're flying now. Trump looking all fierce here as the drone strikes begin to hit. Attack of the drones. The United States has begun deploying attacking drones to South Korea. They were doing this because North Korea has increased their nuclear and missile programs. Great Eagle unmanned aerial systems are permanently stationed at the Kunsan Air Base, which is 150 miles south of Seoul. Stationing of this company, which will be assigned to the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade of the 2nd Infantry Division, directly supports the U.S. Army strategic plan to add one Gray Eagle company to each division in the Army. U.S. Forces Korea said in a press release. Here we have North Korea's latest missile test. We'll play some of this footage for you. Actually, this one looks a little bit different. This is from our statist propaganda media that makes up CNN. There's Kim Jong-un, who they're planning on killing. That's who SEAL Team 6 wants to take out. Here they show us a map. And notice how they put a red filter on it, make it look a little bit more ominous for you guys. And then this douchebag, hi, I'm with CNN, Clue News Network. I'm reading a teleprompter right now. Last week, North Korea fired 4 missiles, it was 4, into the Sea of Japan in a practice run for hitting U.S. military bases in Japan and potentially Hawaii, the great state of Hawaii. Trump authorizes CIA attack drones and sends more to South Korea.
So, he read a little bit of one of the articles. Again, if I can get this to pull up, which you probably don't want to. No. Okay, I'm going to try another site, so don't be despaired too quickly here. Okay. This popped up for me, so we should be okay. Maybe. Sorry about this, guys. We will get this figured out here. just going to go ahead and search for an article that is covering it. Okay, well, I got this from The Hill, and this one's just titled The U.S. Deploying Attack Drones to South Korea. The United States has begun deploying attack drones to South Korea as tensions with North Korea remain high over Pyongyang's persistent in its missile and nuclear program. U.S. Forces Korea said Monday that the company of Gray Eagle Unmanned Aerial Systems, UAS, will be permanently stationed at Kunsan Air Base, about 150 miles south of Seoul. The stationing of this company, which will be assigned to the 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade of the 2nd Infantry Division, directly supports the U.S. Army's strategic plan to add one Gray Eagle company to each division in the Army, U.S. Forces Korea said in a press release. The UAS adds significant intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities to U.S. Forces Korea and our Republic of Korea partners. The timeline for the full deployment of the drone company is unclear. I'm sure most of them are there for the drills going on. It says the deployment comes as tensions on the peninsula remain fraught after North Korea's latest missile tests. Last week, North Korea fired 4 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan in what Pyongyang says was practice to hit U.S. military bases in Japan. A day later, the U.S. military announced that it had begun deploying a missile defense system, a plan agreed upon by the U.S. and South Korea in July. The Gray Eagle drones being deployed are capable of staying in the sky for up to 24 hours and can carry up to 4 Hellfire missiles, according to an Army profile. A company consists of 9 drones and a number of ground support equipment, 5 ground control stations, 6 ground data terminals, 1 mobile ground control station, 3 satellite ground data terminals, an automatic takeoff and landing systems, and more. The system will be maintained by a company of 128 soldiers, according to the profile. The unmanned South Korea military official told South Korea's Yonhap News Agency the drones will enhance the alliance ability to strike targets on the ground should war break out. In case of war on the Korean Peninsula, the unmanned aircraft could infiltrate into the skies of North Korea and make a precision strike on the War Command and other major military facilities, the official said. So, we have our side talking about reconnaissance and, things like that, but then, the South Koreans like, yeah, we could fly right in and take them out. So there seems to be a little bit of a conflict of what these drones are going to be there for. And now, to point out something that Christopher Green said, actually the CIA is a change in the use of drones when it comes to no longer does it go through military channels. It can stay within the CIA channels. Therefore, there is less chance of leaks and the ability for them to hide even more than probably what they already hide from the American public. Drone strikes that have been targeted by the CIA but carried out by the military is something that is going to be recorded by the military. Even if it's classified, top secret, or whatever, it's recorded. If the CIA no longer has to go through any actual military channels to achieve its goal, that can mean we, even in the future, might never know the truth of how something got started. A lot of what we know about, false flags in history, like, Gulf of Tonkin, these type things, we know because it's documented. Even if people don't know at the time, at least we can go back in history and be like, the wool was pulled over people's eyes. We can learn from the mistakes. We can make better decisions based off of the truth in history. But right now we got so many people trying to rewrite history, and not in a more truthful manner, which I agree there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to truth. We can't always just, show the bad or just show the good. We have to show it all. And just because there might be bad doesn't mean we can't learn from the good. You can cherry pick, I like this person for this, but dislike him for this. That's not something that's bad to say. So when you look at this whole military buildup and more involvement, it's something that I think we need to actually pay more attention to, because this could get out of control quick. And we already know what's going on in the Middle East, but think about bringing a whole nother front into the situation. Would that not be bringing us closer to a world war? So, we need to be aware of propaganda and real fake news, which will, I believe, try to draw us into war. I think that's where we're headed. Now, there is something else that someone brought up that I believe is also, there's truth to it. What this means, I don't know. Again, I think the war would come if things got out of hand. I think it is a whole bunch of flexing of muscles. A lot of, crap talking, but hopefully it doesn't get out of control, doesn't escalate. Because I think China's right for once when they say it's no good for any country. I think all of the countries throughout the world right now are having their own issues. And that kind of will go off into something we'll talk about later, which is nationalism. But what someone else told me was the TPP, which was a bad deal. Bad deal, we can agree on that. This person goes, well, we might need to strengthen ties with our allies in Asia that like, Japan, to have a partnership, which a lot of people say we kind of started getting away from Japan and more into China because cheaper product. Um, but then you also look at what Japan was doing at the time, and they were, technically revolutionizing things, and they still are. Um, they're always, trying to make gadgets and robots, and yeah, now it's going on over in China, but China also is someone that, even though they do have innovation, they also impart still other people's innovation. Not saying they don't have their own original things, but they're really big on getting other people's originals and copying them. That they're known for that. Um, could this, team up, show force, bring in more defense for Japan, South Korea, um, some of these other countries that we ally with in the Asian area, Asian Pacific, um, to try to strengthen ties. Possibility. I think there is truth to that. But again, I think there's a lot of moving parts to that whole deal. Now, we'll get into this whole tax thing here in a minute. But I brought up that nationalism. The world, every country, because we've made this entangled web throughout the world. When one economy drops, every economy drops. Even, if it's not the top economy, it'll pull down the top economy. We're very entangled, and it wouldn't be so bad if half of everything was manufactured here. If half of everything was manufactured here, then there would be more ability for that manufacturing to expand if they start seeing the markets in other countries dropping off. And I think that would be a good idea for any country, but you can't force it. It needs to be something that is more free market, but that also means regulations have to drop. But nationalism, I think we have to be careful. And this is where I think there's people near Trump that, even though they agree with a lot, and he might agree with them a lot on things, I think there might be a disconnect of why they want certain things a certain way. There's theories out there that, there's people that are trying to make the system break down so they can create something out of the ashes. And they want it to look like, look, we're doing the right things, but no one's caring or giving it a chance. And this seems to be happening around the world. And when we look at nationalism, it can get very, very dangerous because that's where, fascism, socialism, communism comes from. To get any of that, you have to create a nationalism. Because you have to be able to rally up the citizenry to want this. And we're already seeing the start of that. They've already got the youth, clamoring for socialism or communism. But then rejecting fascism. We don't want Trump. He's a fascist. I don't know if he is. But they don't want fascism, but then they want communism and socialism. Do you understand these are all on the same spectrum? And they come from nationalism. Nationalism will spawn any of those, depending on who's in power, what side's in power. Because nationalism will lead to authoritarianism. It does. And I want people to be clear. I'm not talking about what some people call patriotism. I love the country for the principles that it originally stood for. Freedom of religion, freedom of association, they believe in that. They are patriotic to a belief, an ideology of freedom. A nationalism doesn't believe in freedom. They believe in the state being the ultimate, authority. They don't believe people can be vastly different in their belief. They can live their life as they choose, as long as they agree with everybody's life. You can't go, oh, I don't agree with that. That's your opinion. You should have kept it to yourself. No freedom of speech. It's that fake smile, that fake, hi, how are you doing today? Now I believe, when you kind of go around and you have a happier attitude and you don't really care what that person's life is, but that means that, well, someone that might be one way knows someone that disagrees with their lifestyle, but doesn't maybe, harass them or nothing, but because they don't like my lifestyle, I'm going to make my presence in their life more abundant. And they basically start harassing, but with a smile on their face, just to antagonize. You see where this goes. It becomes a awful thing, and it actually spreads more hatred, I believe. I think freedom, where you have the freedom to not associate, a freedom to speak your mind without fear of retribution. Now, that's not saying, well, I disagree with this person because they're, this way. So, I think, everybody should rally and we should go, hurt these people. No, that's not freedom. That's abridging freedom. Now, one more thing, something I've talked about before, because I've dealt with it personally, about getting into, you know, facial recognition, iris scanning, thumbprints at work, and things like that, and accessing, your bank account and things like that. Well, I have one here, a short one from Reason, covering biohacking. And I want to cover this real quick before we get into all this Donald Trump's taxes.
This is consumer genetic engineering. I think it's really going to become a consumer industry. What do I want? I want my yeast, I want them to smell like this. I want them to ferment faster. Yeast that glow. We give people the ability to take a gene from a jellyfish and stick it in a yeast that they're going to use to brew or bake or something like that. And with the FDA, everything is just no. What about this? No. How much of this can be allowed in there? Nothing. Zero. No. No.
Okay, that clip just whacked out. Okay. Now, when you look at things like facial recognition, iris scan, all this, there's one thing that when government gets involved lately, which you can see in countries overseas, Middle East Asia area, more Asia. When they start collecting data like that, one thing they like to do is also get DNA. Well, one thing Reason put out was about biohacking. Well, biohacking, I understand what some people want to do with it. It's also where, GMOs come from. They're biohacking. This is, do-it-yourself biohacking and how it can change the world if the government allows it. And the biohackers, the underground ones, want to biohack and then ask for forgiveness later. Rather than permission. And this is going to become more real, definitely, if we get to a state where facial recognition, iris scan, and DNA and thumbprints and all that becomes standard. It's going to become standard. I think it will even be, part of the cashless society, the smart homes, and biohacking will be something that we've seen on, a sci-fi type, movie program. It's not something I think we can recollect right now. It's something that we look at and we try to think of what it would look like, but I think the movies make it look even better than what it is, and a lot of times that doesn't look good. And we need to stay away from it. There's a level that we're going to reach where between biohacking, AI, we become a subpar species. There will be a definite split, I believe, in the human species. And I think it's already been happening. I already think there's been chemical induced changes. And I personally believe there's been intentional. There's proven intentional testing, at least. How far does that go? There's so many examples, whether it be military, whether it be, things they did with Native American children. We're going to put them in these like boarding type schools and re-educate them. That happened in Canada and, North America. There's been ghettos that have been tested on. There's so many examples. We already have GMOs. If you've ever tuned in here on UCY.TV to Before the First Cup, you probably heard some of the crazy and very odd things that are going on in the scientific field. I tend to reject things that are going to collect my data as much as possible. I've been on Facebook for a long time before I realized, how far the facial recognition, at that point I wasn't too aware. But when it comes to accessing my own things outside of maybe Facebook or social media accounts, I reject those type of things. In Australia, they're already putting out cashless banks. Cash your check at your bank. It goes on a card. You don't get cash. I reject that type of principle. I'm one of those people. I withdraw quite a bit of cash off my card. At least some on, so I can make electronic purchases or bill payments or things like that. But I definitely like to have most or at least half in cash. I don't like leaving money in the bank. Okay. Give A second here. Reload a few things. Hopefully that'll help some stuff out here. Okay. I have one more here from AMTV, a short one here. Shocking, Donald Trump paid his taxes.
Shocking, shocking. Rachel Maddow, Mad Dog Muddo. This is shocking information, folks. Donald Trump pays his taxes. Did you hear me? This is the shocking news and shocking information as I open up all these windows here that came out of MSNBC? Oh, yeah, Rachel Maddow. Yeah, that was the big story that she had. Donald Trump pays his taxes. It's absolutely unbelievable. Here we have Rachel with nothing after fake news report on Donald Trump. We've dodged 2 winter storms in a row. The first was named Stella, and the second looked to be called Rachel, as in Rachel Maddow. Nature will take its course, but Maddow veered wildly off course last night when the pride of MSNBC announced via social media that she had Donald Trump's tax returns and released them at 9 p.m. As the big moment eclipsed, she clarified that it would be returns from just 2005 that we'd see. Okay, that's cool, Rachel. Yeah, what do you got? Yeah, show us the damning information on Donald Trump. Then the moment of truth, and nothing. Maddow has 2 pages, this is what she had, of Trump's 2005 tax return, which showed him earning $150 million and paying $38 million in taxes. Yeah, that's right. He actually paid more percentage-wise than Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders, the socialist. That's the bombshell. No Russians, no shady deals, nothing. And without millions of people who dared to sample MSNBC, if just once, returned home to the comfort of Tucker Carlson on Fox News. So talk about fake news. There is no news. Trump, in the meantime, fired back at fake news MSNBC broadcasts and blast Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who nobody ever heard of for surfacing his 2005 tax return after journalists hints the president may have leaked it himself. So Trump fires back. Now, I do think here, though, this is where I think there's a little bit of conspiracy, and I actually believe it. I do think Trump probably leaked this. She might not know, like she's just the pawn thinking she's going to release a bombshell. I think Trump's team leaked his tax return. That's just my humble opinion. I don't think it just surfaced. Even if he says that, somebody leaked it, Trump does. I don't believe him. I just think that's reality. But she's just she doesn't know. She can't even figure out what type of haircut she wants on a day-to-day basis. So, again, she doesn't know. She's just a pawn. David K. Johnson says, gee, Donald, your White House confirmed my story. POTUS, fake tweet, sad. And here we have a comparison chart of those that allegedly are so much better than Donald Trump in terms of what they pay in taxes. Look who's at the bottom here. Socialist plant, Hillary Clinton. I'm trying to think of a good name for him. Basically, he just licks her freaking warded toes. Bernie Sanders was he was a political movement created to endorse specifically Hillary Clinton from the get-go. People were like, they never believed me, but then, of course, he eventually endorsed her because that was all that he was supposed to do, is fill the political vacuum and make love by kissing the ugly, rotted, diseased, warded toes of the Wicked Witch of the West that made up Hillary Clinton. But here we have Bernie, only paid 13.5% in taxes. Romney, 14.1%. Obama, 18.7%. Bush, 20.5%. Kerry, 22.9%. And then, ta-da, Donald Trump, 25%. He pays in taxes. He pays more in taxes than all of these stooges. Another reason why I think selectively the 2005 report was released. Not that it's not true. It is. But again, I do think that there is some proof to the pudding in that regard. And here we have Bernie Sanders, who just endorsed, Hillary Clinton, because he was just a fakery. It's just a fakery. It was just a test marketing socialism here in the United States of America. People told me, oh, he'd never endorse Hillary Clinton. Look at the way he's speaking to her. And of course he did, because he always was going to endorse. This was all leaked by WikiLeaks, by the way. Bernie was working on the inside. The whole thing is an illusion, just like the two-party system is, and just like this person is a teleprompter reader over here. This person is not the president. He's the most powerful teleprompter reader on the face of the planet. It's just so amazing. MSNBC released Donald Trump's 2005 tax forms tonight. Trump paid a higher tax rate than socialist Bernie Sanders. Again, folks, telling, shocking, Donald Trump pays his taxes. Wow, it's just so amazing.
Again, AMTV on YouTube. Check them out. Now, I, too, agree that I believe that Trump's team put this out. There's something that just says that this has, his handwriting all over it. Why 2005? 1. 2, they got 2 pages, a 1040 form, 2 pages. I don't think anybody that has write-offs have 2 pages. Why only 2 pages? Why not all the form that shows, what was written off, where's all that information? Why only 2 pages? Because those 2 pages will show, what he wrote, the total amount he wrote off. It'll show, the income for that year, and it'll show what he paid in taxes. It'll show enough to say, hey, he paid 25% in taxes. Again, why 2005 out of all years? Because he paid 25% in taxes. Even after writing off, what was it, 120 or something like that mil, still paid 25% in taxes. And then again, why only 2 pages? Because the details don't need to be out there. This makes me lean to think that, yeah, this came somewhere from Donald Trump's team. Now, there's another part to it. People on the right, like Christopher Green, want to, yeah, look, she was made to look like a joke. She was made to look like a joke. She was made to look like a joke. She was made. Hold on. Why is everybody talking about Rachel Maddow if her breaking his tax forms was a flop? Her name is in the news everywhere. She did what she needed to do to get ratings. She got them. Don't think she was just dumb in doing that. It didn't have to be explosive news. She got the ratings. Now, it could backfire down the road where breaking news. Oh, yeah, whatever, breaking news. And then they don't tune in when it is breaking news. They tune in someone else that's breaking the news. Again, it can backfire. And another thing, it's a diversion from Asia, South Korea, It's a diversion from the health care plan. And it's a diversion from the immigration issues. It knocked people off a little bit to come in and talk about nothing. That's why I kind of wanted to save this for the end of the broadcast. I wanted to get actual information in. Because this knocked alternative and mainstream media off topic of any real news. We're not talking about our foreign affairs. We're not talking about what's going on in the Middle East. We're not talking about what's going on in Asia. We're not talking about, you know, how our trade partnerships going to go with when it comes to, you know, Britain versus maybe the EU because of the Brexit. What if EU says if you make a deal outside the EU with Britain, then we're not going to be a part of it. Any deal that Britain makes has to involve all three, the EU, Britain, and the US. What if Britain says, no, we want a separate deal outside of any EU deal? We want to make sure this is our deal. What do we do? We need to be having discussions about, you know, authoritarianism, nationalism versus a freedom lover or a, you know, patriot. And again, I get mixing vibes from Trump. But one vibe I do get is I think he has good intentions. But good intentions don't, you know, seal the deal. I think we have to hold his feet to the fire. I think Ron Paul is doing a good deal with that. Rand Paul, when it comes to the health care bill. Now, I want to kind of move on to some other political news. One involving Rand Paul. This from We Are Change. We'll dive into this one here. And this is Rand Paul and Tulsi Gabbard unite for most important act of 2017.
Dominated over a freaking snowstorm with Weintards talking about the flake news. We get it. It's snowing. But I wanted to take this opportunity to address what I think is the most important Senate bill right now in the U.S. House of Representatives. And to understand the whole context of this, you have to understand the American foreign policy under Barack Obama and Donald Trump when it comes to what's exactly happening inside of Syria. Now, this bill is called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. It was introduced by U.S. Senator Rand Paul, a Republican in the Senate, from the original creator of this bill, Tulsi Gabbard, a Congresswoman Democrat who introduced it in the U.S. Congress. And this bill specifically outlines how U.S. taxpayers should not be financing and supporting radical Islamic terrorists like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I'm going to link a copy of this bill in the description below so you could read it for yourself, but you might be asking yourself, why do we need a bill so our tax dollars do not finance radical Islamic terrorism? You would think it would be logical, like, oh yeah, we shouldn't support the bad guys. But the original creator of this bill, Tulsi Gabbard, actually traveled all the way to Syria to meet with Bashar al-Assad, their president, on a discovery mission, which now she is in trouble over with the House Ethics Committee. And when she came back from the trip, she went public with the fact that Barack Obama funded ISIS. She even went on CNN and told everyone exactly what she saw. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because, as we know, Barack Obama's foreign policy towards Libya was not only a complete debacle, a complete failure, but utterly destroyed that country and made it a hotbed for radical Islamic terrorists because the United States decided to finance rebel groups against the existing government, Gaddafi, while bombing it at the same time, creating a failed state with massive sectarian violence that made it the hotbed for radical Islamic terrorists that it is now, that were financed by the U.S. government. And under Barack Obama, the United States did the same thing to Syria, as even U.S. pilots came out and confirmed how they were stopped from bombing 75% of ISIS targets inside of Syria. Meanwhile, supposedly accidentally killing 83 Syrian troops, helping radical Islamic terrorists gain key strategic points inside of Syria. And it wasn't only the United States that was financially supporting radical Islamic terrorist groups inside of Syria in order to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. It was also Turkey that not only armed them, but also bought ISIS-controlled oil. And even with all that information being well publicly known and stated fact, Turkey then even came out and pointed the finger at the United States and said that they were the ones who were supporting ISIS and other terrorists inside of Syria. Now you're probably saying, okay, that was Barack Obama. What about Donald Trump? He said he would work with the Russians in order to defeat ISIS. That was his major platform when he was running for U.S. president. But the latest news we have been getting about Trump's plan for Syria is very troubling, and that's why this bill is so relevant right now. And if passed, will change everything. Because we are seeing Donald Trump call for safe zones, aka no-fly zones in Syria. He has invited the Turks in order to participate in the civil war conflict inside of Syria, which we told you last week would be very troubling since Turkish actions have been mainly directed against the Kurds inside of Syria and not against radical Islamic terrorists. This is the same country who openly previously said before that they wanted Bashar al-Assad gone. And now the Syrian president is saying that the American and Turkish forces inside of his countries are, quote, invaders, and that he did not give them the green light in order to enter his country, and that they are not interested in fighting ISIS, only creating a further mess in his country. And it does seem like a mess, as Donald Trump has just announced yesterday that he will be expanding more troops inside of Syria. And yet again, this also angers Turkey, because as hundreds of U.S. Marines are going into northern Syria, they're going to be fighting along Kurdish Syrian forces, the same Kurdish forces that the Turkish want to eliminate and hate. So yes, it is an utter complete mess, especially with Trump now saying that he won't work with Russia in order to defeat ISIS. And now we're seeing Syrian and Russian forces going after the city of Raqqa, while the U.S. Kurdish forces with Turkey begrudgingly angry at them, trying to get into Raqqa too, creating an utterly disastrous situation which wouldn't happen if the United States would not finance radical Islamic terrorists and rebel groups inside of that country. And now, to make the situation worse, we're learning that the U.S. Army won't even leave Syria after ISIS is defeated. So with the unpredictable Donald Trump foreign policy that we have seen so far, this bill in the House and Senate, even though very late to the situation, is a breath of fresh air and hopefully will stop the United States from repeating the same mistakes that they have been making with their foreign policy for decades. Now, even though the bill was just introduced, and if you like to play politics and still believe in the system, if there ever was a bill to support, this would be it. Now, a lot of people don't know the fact that Barack Obama and his administration created, funded, started ISIS, and they don't know about the complex situation unfolding with Donald Trump's policy towards Syria. So please share this video with them. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you guys who are supporting us on patreon.com/wearechange, because without you, we wouldn't be here being able to investigate and break down this important news to you.
wearechange.org and We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, I think that if we're not going to support terrorists, that we shouldn't have a problem passing that bill. We'll see how that bill goes. Now, I'm not sure what articles I want to cover offhand. Okay. I'm going to cover this one by Jeffrey Tucker at tucker.liberty.me. Grayball, Uber super cool app to subvert trolls. What can a company do about trolls who use their technology to hurt the company and other consumers? It's a tough problem for a technology company like Uber because anyone can download the app and summon a car and get picked up. Some of these accounts inevitably will belong to bad actors who are up to no good. Reputation data for individual users are fantastic, but there's still the problem that users can make new accounts. What can you do? A primary use of the trick prohibiting wicked sting operations. Several years ago, reveals the New York Times, Uber had a fantastic idea for a suspect malevolent troll who used the service. The company dropped an extra layer on their smartphone application. The passenger would call a car, someone would answer the query, but then the ride would be canceled. This happened repeatedly. The beauty of the strategy is that the person doesn't know it is happening, and the process discourages the creation of new user accounts. It's not blackballing, it's about being grayballed, which is the name of the application. Peacefully blocking bureaucrats. Awesome, right? It's especially valuable when you consider a primary use of the trick prohibiting wicked sting operation by transportation authorities who were seeking to shut down consumer access to an alternative to municipal cabs. If the software sensed that the account was plotting an attack, Grayball would go into effect. If the data points to a problem passenger, Grayball goes into effect. There is nothing illegal about refusing rides to anyone for any reason. How could Uber know? There are many techniques. The software could sniff out credit cards attached to police credit unions, for example, or accounts that would open and close regularly around government buildings. Another strategy would be to match accounts with throwaway phones, often purchased by city officials only for this purpose. The app even looked at associated social media accounts and content of postings. If the data pointed to a problem passenger, Grayball would go into effect. Woohoo. This turns out to be a major way that Uber managed to become so awesome in city after city all over the world, even as regulators, taxi monopolists, and meddlesome city council members try to stop it from happening. Consumers got hooked and lobbied on behalf of the company, and the rest is history. This is not a scandal. Now, you might think that the company would be praised for such excellent creativity, an app for getting around people who are trying to destroy your business model. Many companies would like such a thing. In fact, most citizens would. But the New York Times doesn't see it that way. They treated the revelation like it was some kind of scandal. Uber has for years engaged in a worldwide program to deceive the authorities in markets where its low-cost ride-hailing service was resisted by law enforcement or in some instances had been banned. Grayball is a public service. Clutch those pearls, journalists. The truth is that the app was fully approved by the company's legal team, and it is easy to see why. There's nothing wrong with knowing your customer. There's nothing wrong with refusing to pick up people who mean you harm. There's nothing illegal about refusing rights to anyone for any reason, and this is how it should be. And keep this in mind as you consider the ethics of these practices. The purpose of the technology is to help the public gain access to better transportation services at cheaper prices, and the app worked to do this despite how the company has consistently been threatened with both public and private violence merely for wanting to give people rides around the city. Gray Ball is a public service, and it sure beats anything cities have done for commuters. If there are any legal problems here, they surely should be placed at the feet of those city officials conducting sting operations designed to entrap people engaged in the peaceful activity of giving rides in exchange for money. Such operations, at a minimum, involved perpetrating fraud with the attempt to disrupt commercial activity. Uber should be congratulated for figuring out a way around this problem. With that, every commercial service could create and smart with its use of technology. Be so creative and smart with their use of technology. Now, that's also posted by Jeffrey Tucker over at fee.org, Foundation for Economic Education. That's another great site to go check out. That I read from liberty.me, though, tucker.liberty.me. Go check them out. Now, Uber was really a good demonstration of how the free market can actually, solve problems. Where did the problem really stem from? Well, maybe not in your area, but in a lot of big cities, there is a taxi monopoly, and it's helped become a monopoly through government regulation. New York and other big cities have been known for this, where you hurry up, pass a law, now you have to get permits within 30 days, but one of the guys that helped write the law just happens to own a taxi service and buys, 75% of the permits. Expands his business, and yeah, there's some other companies in town, but they don't have the brand new vehicles. They can't really expand because they can't get more permits, and they have to hope another business goes out. And well, at the end of the day, they'll only be able to get 25% unless something happens where the monopoly kind of gets a jab to it. But Uber is that jab. Uber is hurting that monopoly in a lot of these cities, where the person that owns the majority of the permits in these bigger cities is now losing a lot of business to Uber. Well, Uber doesn't have to have these permits or placards or, stickers or whatever. Uber doesn't have those, but they're paying the city for these. And that's where the city wants to step in and go, oh yeah, that you're not permitted to ride share for profit. You don't have a placard, sticker, or permit. But again, they've made it very hard for that to be successful, because a lot of these are city regulations, and people might not exactly let the city know exactly how they got their extra money, just that they made a little extra money on the side. Find something, entertainment. went to birthday parties and entertained as a clown. You know what? They might not know. Okay. Make sure we have. What time is it here? Okay. We're good. We're good. Now, I wanted to play this if I can find it real quick. Sorry, I'm having an issue finding it here. We'll find it though. We will. Okay, when it comes to this healthcare bill that isn't really being talked about right this minute, Rand Paul was on Face the Nation, and he said, and this was like 3 days ago, that the Senate conservatives aren't going to vote for the new health care bill. I want to play this real quick.
Now we turn to the critics of the new plan. Yesterday, Vice President Pence traveled to Kentucky, perhaps to put a little pressure on one of the bill's most vocal opponents, Republican Senator Rand Paul, who is with us now. Welcome, Senator. What's wrong with this bill?
I think it's basically Obamacare light. Keeps the subsidies, keeps the taxes for a year, then keeps the Cadillac tax forever, the tax on good insurance. Keeps the individual mandate, interestingly. You know, Republicans have complained for a year saying we didn't like that government was going to make you pay a penalty. Well, now instead of paying the penalty to the government, you pay the penalty to the insurance industry. There's also bailouts for the insurance industries. The one primary thing that's wrong with Obamacare that's most visible to everybody is that premiums are rising and through the roof, soaring in the individual market. That will happen under the Ryan plan as well because they do nothing to fix the fundamental problem.
What Paul Ryan would say is you're missing the forest for the trees, which is to say you're missing that this is changing Medicaid fundamentally, making it a block grant that goes back to the states, that it's getting rid of the Obamacare entitlement, that it's getting health savings accounts, which Republicans have long asked for.
Let's start just with the Medicaid expansion. It may be fundamentally changing or it may not. They're built into Medicaid. They're going to block grant it, but not with a fixed amount of money. It's going to go up at about 5% a year. It goes up at CPI, an indicator of inflation in the medical community, which is going up at about 4% plus 1. So it's going to go up at about 5% a year. The question is that a lot slower than what Medicaid's going up now? Is it quicker? I think it's still building in the growth of an entitlement program that really isn't paid for. So, for example, under Obamacare, I think it was dishonest accounting. They said the federal government will pay for Medicaid, 100% of it. Well, we have no money. We borrow $1 million a minute and have a $20 trillion debt, so it's dishonest. It sounds good. Give somebody stuff for free. Give them free health care, but it's not really free. We're borrowing it from China, which really threatens our country from within.
You said that it retains the individual mandate. The argument is that if you don't have something to get healthy people into the insurance market, that it ends up being just sicker and older people, and that's why premiums go up.
Well, exactly right. The fundamental premise of Obamacare was we have to have healthy people buy it, so we're going to give them a mandate. So here's the interesting thing that left and right, people who are really looking at this agree on, it's going to get worse. The individual market will get worse when you get rid of the individual mandate and make it an insurance mandate, which is a slightly lesser penalty. And so more and more sick people will be in the pool. And let's say you've lost your job and you've lost your insurance. Do you have any incentive to get back in and pay the penalty? No, the penalty will look at, people are writing now that it's a disincentive to buy insurance. Why don't you wait till you're sick? So really, you can't have an insurance model where people wait till they're sick to get insurance. It doesn't work. And here's the problem with Ryan's plan. He keeps that fundamental aspect of Obamacare. He doesn't change it.
You say that Speaker Ryan is pulling the wool over the eyes of the president. Really? Pulling the wool?
I think there's a separation between the two. I've talked to the president, I think, 3 times on Obamacare, and I hear from him that he's willing to negotiate. You know what I hear from Paul Ryan? It's a binary choice, young man. But what does a binary choice mean? His way or the highway? There are 2 choices.
Well, I think his argument would be the binary choice is you do this now through reconciliation, a Senate process that's kind of a pain, and then you have a second piece of legislation.
What we're hearing is a binary choice is it's the Ryan plan or the status quo. And what he's rammed through his committee is his without any amendments. And that's the question. If we get what we've got from Ryan, Obamacare Light, he will not have the votes. And we have to get to that point before true negotiations begin. Right now, I think there's a charm offensive going on. Everybody's being nice to everybody because they want us to vote for this, but we're not going to vote for it.
You talked to I'm going to get to the Senate in a second, but you said you spoke with the president. Where do you think he's willing to negotiate on these issues that you've highlighted?
I don't think the president is rigid in support of the House bill. I think he's open to seeing how we can get consensus. And what I've told the president is what I'm telling everybody. We're united on repeal, not so much on replacement. We do not agree with the fundamental 3 or 4 things that Ryan has: subsidies, taxes, mandates, and insurance bailout. That's Obamacare. We don't want that. If you take that off, what do you have? You've got repeal. Now, what you do to help people...
Can you do just repeal by itself?
Well, no, I would do replacement in a separate bill, because what I would do through replacement is there are 2 things you have to do to fix the individual market. You have to tell people that they can buy any kind of insurance they want, so you get rid of the mandates on what it goes into insurance, but you also have to allow for people to join a buying group. If people join a healthcare association or a co-op,
right, that's part of the Ryan plan.
That drives down. It's not in the Obamacare Light proposal.
It's in the second set of legislation.
But the reason they have to be discussed at the same time is CBO is going to come out and say a lot of people are not covered.
Right.
So how are we going to cover them? I would cover them with something much better than Obamacare, and that would be joining a co-op to drive down prices, but also to get guaranteed issue where you won't be dropped.
Let me ask you a question. You said that there's room perhaps for negotiation with the president, but Mike Pence was in your state, and he said, for us to seize this opportunity to repeal and replace Obamacare once and for all, we need every Republican in Congress. That sounds like he's talking to you.
I think that's the pre-negotiation. We're still in the pre-negotiation period. The real negotiation period comes, and I promise you this is the way it's going to work. We will get Obamacare Light, Ryan's plan, unless there's enough conservatives in the House to say no. If there's enough to say no, when they start voting on the rules of debate, if they bring down the rule, if they stop him in the tracks, then a true negotiation begins. No negotiation right now counts until they determine they have enough votes to stop Obamacare Light.
Let me ask you a question on wiretapping, because I know that's an issue you care a lot about. There are your colleagues, Lindsey Graham and Senator Sass, have said that this claim the president made about being wiretapped as a candidate by President Obama, they say this is too incendiary to wait for the committees to adjudicate it, that the president should bring forward whatever evidence he has. Does that bother you, matter to you?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that I think everybody's been getting the story wrong. I doubt that Trump was a target directly of any kind of eavesdropping. But I'm not saying it didn't happen. I think there's a very good chance it does. I don't have any special information, but the way it works is the FISA court, through Section 702, wiretaps foreigners and then listens to Americans. It's a backdoor search of Americans, and because they have so much data, they can type Donald Trump into their vast resources of people they're tapping overseas, and they get all of his phone calls. And so they did this to President Obama. 1,227 times eavesdrops on President Obama's phone calls, then they mask him. But here's the problem, and General Hayden said this the other day. He said even low-level employees can unmask the caller. That's probably what happened to Flynn. They're not targeting Americans, they're targeting foreigners, but they're doing it purposefully to get to Americans.
Okay, so your point is the president would have been caught in a net, or excuse me, candidate Trump caught in a net but not targeted directly.
Or his associates, but it's very dangerous because they're revealing that now to the public.
All right, thank you, Senator. We ran out of time.
Rand Paul on Face the Nation. Now, do I think in the state it's in right now, will this health care be passed? Obamacare light. Paul Ryan care. Be Trump care if it got passed all the way through. What would that do? Well, he points out that. But what else is it going to do? I think it would ensure that either the House or the Senate, one of the two will surely be lost next election, and possible next presidential election, Trump. I think Rand Paul was right when he said there's a lot of sweet talking. The wool being pulled over Trump's eyes. I like I said earlier, I get dual vibes from Trump because I believe him to be sincere about a lot of things. But I think that there's certain people that are trying to convince him to compromise here and we'll help you out there. And I would urge Trump not to listen to those people, definitely like Paul Ryan, because these type of people are always shown to be two-faced, and I don't think you'll get what you want. I think that they will get what they want, and then they'll deadlock you on other things. You gotta remember, these are the people that don't want you as president. The progressive on both sides of the aisle don't want Trump because he's not a globalist. The progressive movement is a globalist movement now. They've went beyond, just what they want here in America. It's a global government that they want. It's how do they get each culture, each society in a position so they can create that global government. They thought they were going to do that with the EU. It's, in danger of completely collapsing, which I think it will and deserves to. I am afraid of what might come out of it with the global nationalist movement now, where authoritarianism and this iron fist type movement seems to be growing. It's not a freedom movement. It is a revolutionary movement within a lot of countries. But, after the American Revolution, the French tried a revolution and it didn't turn out the same. Even though they're like, look at, how America did it. Look at, well, there was some principles and a structure and a value system that was also behind the American Revolution. A lot of people miss that or want to throw it off. Oh, it was a Christian movement. There were bad things. There no doubt there were bad things. But there was at least a sense of value and moral that was brought to the table. Before slavery really exploded in the South and really became this thing after the country started growing, there were a lot of prominent black people in the community. So, there was still a moral and structure and value system. And there were also slaves at the time, no doubt. lot of issues and a lot of good things. Again, when you look at history, you have to look at both sides, but you also have to be able to go, this was good, even though if that person did this, that was bad. We have to find the good and learn from the bad. Take the good and learn from the bad. And when the French Revolution first broke off, there was a lot of talk about some of these values, but it was the people that didn't look at a value or a principle that really took. These were, bloodlust type people. And it became brutal, bloody, and a lot of innocents died. So I look at the breakdown of the EU is a double-edged sword. It depends on where each country goes. A full nationalist or hey, we want to be sovereign and a free society. And I hope Britain can do that. And I think one thing that would help that is hurry up and get out of the EU. Two, I think they need to bring their gun rights back. Because when you do that, you can make your citizenry a formidable force against other government invasions. When governments fell, the citizens still fought in World War II. They were rebels then. Because, well, the government fell and you're still fighting, well, now you're a rebel. But it was the citizens that were able to,